What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Bed Boys, your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian.
I'm Brian.
And we are the Bed Boys. Once again, we got a banger episode lined up for y'all. I'm going to be sipping on a Bum Energy Blue Snow Cone. Nothing new. I had to go with something I knew was going to be good. I knew it was going to treat me right. So picked it up the QT. It was buy two, get one free. So not a bad deal. Yeah. You guys know we're a big fan of Bum Energy. Bring back the stubby cans. That's the only thing we ask. And that's really about it. So I'm going to go ahead and pop top. Don't need to waste any time here. You guys already know the deal with the bums.
I got a new drink out there for any of our Red Bull fans. The summer edition, the Sadaichi Lime. My lighting is terrible, but we get it in the light. Fuck it, we ball.
I like the color of that can.
It is a sick color. It's so hard to see the can because my lighting is crazy bad in this room right now. But like bright yellow, sugar-free. The sugar-free version still has 20 calories, 3 carbs, but who cares? What is Sadaichi? What is Sadaichi? How do you pronounce it? What do you do with it? Sadaichi is a small lime in Japan. It's a small Japanese tart citrus fruit, harvested green with notes of lime, lemon, and grapefruit, and often has herbal notes to it. It's a key ingredient in a ponzu sauce. So, i.e.
I don't know what any of that. I don't know what that is either.
Ponzu sauce?
Ponzu sauce, no.
It's almost like a really tangy, like tart barbecue.
Okay.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I don't have distinguished tastes, clearly.
Its flavor is very tart, acidic, with a unique aroma and hints of dill, cumin, and pepper. Its origin, native to Japan, with 98% grown in the Tokushima prefecture. And its parentage it's a hybrid fruit, like a yuzu or a tachibana orange.
So it's like a crossbred type of fruit.
Everything I'm getting is that this should be delicious.
Pop that top, will you?
Before we do it, just look how good. I love a cut tab. I'm going to pop that top. Ready? Nice and smooth. I got the vapor coming out. Here we go. It's kind of like a Sprite.
Okay. Not bad. I don't know that wasn't what I was expecting after that long description, but
yeah.
We like Sprite.
I like Sprite, but I was kind of hoping it would be.
I feel like you're a little I would be a little disappointed. I'm a little disappointed.
I don't know what I was expecting, but I know it wasn't a Sprite.
What how many ounces is that can? Is that an 8-ouncer, 12-ouncer?
This is a 12-ouncer.
Okay. So
355 milliliters.
Yep. So that was about $7.
Yeah. It was about $7 to get a Sprite with the same caffeine as a Sprite.
Everyone knows like the Red Bull is they have, what do they have? The 8, the 12, 16, 20. Do they have a 24-ounce can? They have like a 20-ounce can. They have
it just costs them mortgage. 24.
Yeah, like the 8-ounce can starts at like $3.29, and then if you want like their largest size, you have to go up to like you're paying like $6.
The size of Red Bull cans isn't a joke. That's what this thing says. It goes up to a 600 milliliter, which a 600 milliliter would be essentially a 20-ounce.
Yeah, so they go up to 20-ounce. They start at 8 and go up to 20 in 4-ounce increments, and they're usually pretty pricey.
Yeah, but
you ever
the flavor profile of them is usually so incredible. I'm not saying that this isn't good. It's not what I was expecting, but it's still good.
Mm-hmm.
But Red Bull does a great job with flavoring. They kill it with that.
And they really stepped it up by starting to do the seasonal flavors and offering them in the sugar-free. They've always done the seasonal flavors, but until the past couple of years, they've only been full diesel, which is cool for once in a while. But for most people that are a little more health conscious, so to say, you're drinking an energy drink, you want to be somewhat healthy, so you want to have not a lot of sugar. But they really stepped it up with that.
My favorite one, I think, that I've had in recent years, other than, I know we did like a winter one, we had like a plum that you and I really liked.
We did that cinnamon pear. That one was kind of fire.
Yeah,
that was a full
that's
diesel
what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yep.
Cinnamon pear.
That was when we were back in the studio.
Yeah. But I do like the cherry sakura.
I've never had that one. I've seen it.
That's this year's spring edition. I'm a big fan.
I like the watermelon is good, and I like the Juneberry, that like blue can.
Juneberry is really good. The watermelon was sneaky.
Yeah,
I wasn't expecting watermelon to be that good. The tropical one was it was okay.
It was okay.
Yeah, the Fuji apple like ginger was all right. It wasn't great.
Yeah, I thought I was gonna like it a little more. The tropical's pretty stock.
It was like something like a vanilla berry. That was kind of good. It wasn't great, but it was pretty good.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Why don't we jump right into this first topic? So we're actually going to go over an Instagram post that someone else made. Not to talk shit like most other people use to make content nowadays, but I feel like it's a good just discussion to have.
Yeah.
We were kind of talking about it right before. We both had some kind of different takes on it. Not even different takes. Like I kind of was like, well, I don't even like when people make these types of arguments, but I think it is worth having. So you're the one that kind of alerted me to this post. You want to kind of start us off here and we can kind of dive in?
Let me set the stage here. Shout out Coach Wayland. It's a great follow on Instagram. But had a new study, posted some of the findings on there from Breed et al. It was published in 2026, so like very, very new. Why the RDL, not Nordics, are one of the best hamstring builders for athletes. Right. Now, that is his post, not necessarily the name of the study itself. Grabbing the findings. Essentially, he brought in the fact of the RDL produced the highest peak hamstring forces of any exercises tested. The semi-membranosus produced 1.9 times body weight. The biceps femoris long head produced 1.6 times body weight, which was significantly higher than even max sprinting. Obviously, there's the p-values in there. And then it also created the greatest muscle stretch. Now, how other exercises compared. Unilateral hamstring binge, excellent force plus stretch. Nordic hamstring exercise and sliders. Good force, similar to sprinting, but far less stretch. Hip thrust, low force and stretch. Lower force than stretch than walking. So it's better for early rehab. That's interesting. I think we'll have to dig into that. RDL best matches the high load plus high stretch demands of late swing phase and sprinting. Then just kind of goes into practical applications of some of this stuff. Now, I might be the elephant in the room and say, address me. Everybody out there is going to get all of their panties in a bunch. RDL isn't, correlation isn't causation. High force, high stretch kind of relates to muscle development in a way. Enough to where you could say
pretty directly.
That's pretty core. That's causation, not correlation. But yeah. I like that the use of, high forces and a stretch on there. I don't think it's necessarily okay, never touch these other things. You know what I mean? It's kind of neat to see some of the results, though, and where they differ. Obviously, you and I love an RDL. Vastly big on it. We love putting the barbell and load that thing up. Literally load as much as possible. I I put 495 on it the other day and RDL'd it. And then
Fuck
Kel
yeah.
got told that you look like a unit.
Yeah, my first reaction to this was, well, I don't like when people make X exercise is better than X exercise for this reason, which is fair, but I do think it's worth actually digging into.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's easy just to say like, oh, well, why not just do both if they're like one's better for this and one's better for this. Obviously, the RDL is a hip hinge and the Nordic is a knee flexion, so you're going to get a little bit different. You're going to get different things out of both the exercises. It's going to target a different point of the muscle, but I think the biggest one here that we kind of alluded to is the RDL has, I would argue, a greater ability to overload because you can continue to add weight to the bar. Now, some people may argue that, oh, like you can progress a Nordic, like how many people can do a full Nordic? You can keep progressing it until you can actually do all the way down, all the way up, which I guess is a fair argument as well. But I think we all know from, if you've done an RDL, you've done a Nordic, obviously RDLs can leave you sore, but I think Nordic is a lot more stressful overall. You can't
Mm-hmm.
handle as high of volumes. We were just talking before, we'll load up an RDL as like a compound movement for multiple sets. And then a Nordic, it's like, all right, do 2 to 3 reps total and just do them 2 to 3 reps total at like max effort. And that's it. And people still might be blown up from that. Obviously, it's all about the dosage and how you kind of build them into your program over time. But for most people, the Nordic is going to be essentially like an eccentric overload exercise because not many people are going to be able to do the concentric portion of the Nordic unless you're going to work kind of different variations like an archoletic curl and kind of progress that over time. But I think we're just talking about just straight up Nordics here.
Yeah. when we look at a finding like this, there's immediately you're gonna have two types of people. There's gonna be two people that goes. There's gonna be someone that kind of looks at this and goes, "Okay, great. I know that I should be using all these variations depending on different times of the year because of the high stretch, which high stretch is probably going to mean some good soreness, or high forces. High forces mean good soreness, etc. Or like we'll have great muscular development. How we kind of intertwine this in the program or in the hip thrust variation. If we want to have some rehab, and there's gonna be another person. That other person, you don't want to be that other person. Because that other person is going to go, this is fucking stupid, this is fucking bullshit. Nordics are way better, and I'm going to stay on Nordics, and that's my thing. Or if it was something else, it would be, the fucking back squat is the fucking back squat, and that's my favorite thing, and that's the way I'm going to do it because I think it's so much better. It's like, hey, man, your identity's caught up in a modality. What you should look at it as is these are all really good options. And you can swap them in, swap them out. Or you can stay the one that you want. Just know that it has its limitations. But here's the thing. You gotta relax. And it's nice. I feel like that's the two people that read these.
Mm-hmm. And I get it. I think it's kind of ingrained within like strength coaches' psyches to
Yeah.
kind of be like, all right, like this is we like to think that one exercise is kind of like the key because it just makes everything a whole lot simpler. We don't have to think as much, but we're probably leaving some stones unturned and leaving stuff on the table. And I think nothing's really taught me more like reconfirmed like the lesson of like, well, all these different movements that are kind of you can group in the same like category, so to say, whether it's just a muscle group or the type of like movement pattern like squat, hinge, push pull, etc. They're all good options like you said, and at the end of the day, like yeah, like you can try to like optimize and like think whatever, or like you can choose which one you think is best. But if the person's not willing to like push it and load it, I think that's what like working in like AAA this year has told me a lot. And it's kind of weird because it's so much different than like what you're taught, especially coming up through like college S&C. But at the end of the day, like if you're able to load that movement more and like the athlete is willing to put more intent into that, it's probably a little bit better to choose that movement over the one that's quote unquote optimal or the one that you think or personally prefer more. Like,
Yeah.
it's weird because like,
Now, The hard part is just doing that in a collegiate setting.
100%. Yeah,
That's a
they're
slippery slope.
no, yeah, I agree. It's two different things, and like you can't transfer that context over because it's just different. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's definitely a slippery slope,
At some
especially
point.
when you're yeah, especially when you're working with like larger groups. I haven't really had to work this season. Our weight room just literally doesn't fit more than like 5 people in here at a time. Like we're at max capacity, so it's we can have people doing 3 different things.
That makes that nice though. Like silver lining in probably doing more sessions in a day is that every one of those sessions could be a little bit more dialed in.
Yeah, you can definitely get a little bit more quote unquote individualized, whatever you want to
Yeah.
say. Um,
Customizable options.
yeah, so I think that's you made a really good point of like the two camps of people, and like you said, you should probably be swapping out exercises every so often for some variation's sake anyway, and to just kind of like prevent stagnation and progression. Because obviously, like there are some things where it's like you can probably keep them in year round and continue to make like pretty good progression on them, but at some point it's going to get stale. People are going to get super bored of doing the same exercise, and it's just going to be it's not going to be as novel of a stimulus. So it's good to kind of switch it up.
Hmm. The one that was really surprising was the hip thrust.
Yeah,
Obviously,
you love the
like
hip thrust.
I do love a hip thrust. I do. I wouldn't have thought it was as much as low as a force it was. We obviously it being it's a hip flexion extension within a knee flexion because the knee's flexed already. So
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of limiting on like say like a hamstring stimulus. You're limiting how much stretch you get. Now you do get a lot of like glute movement, a lot of stretch across the glute because that's going to be essentially the
Mm-hmm.
driver of that and the hip thrust. Really would have thought more force, but I'm wondering, and I'd love to get my hands on the study. I'm wondering how they measured. Like, was it a standardized weights, and was this not done on a force plate? Because that could make a difference too. If the weight, or say like your knees are on the force plate or whatever, or it was done on a like a biodex or something like that to record that force, or where the RDL is kind of similar, like on that. But it's kind of hard because the lever that's being kind of used isn't interact. It doesn't have a ground interaction in a hip thrust.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if that's like a possibility of being. I'm not saying like, oh, it's a skewed result, but I'm wondering if like that's accounted for. Because if it is, I'd love to. Like that would be really cool. Because then that's like, hey, we know, that kind of that we live so much in the gray area that if this does have like those like little bit of constraints pulled out around it, it could really pull out and kind of just say pause. It could really kind of like provide clarity. And if you have that clarity, it makes some of those exercise selections a little bit easier sometimes. And you kind of know, hey, this isn't as worth it as we thought. We can just kind of like move on from it.
Mm-hmm.
I can chase the rabbits that are more fruitful. So that's kind of cool. It's almost a study like that. You almost think to an extent, how much could you do? How many of those could you do to get published to really not I hate the optimization thing, but like, hey man, you can like recategorize all of your exercise selection to this is high stretch, high force. I know at this point in time I want to pick one of these categories and one of these and one of these.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I found the study actually. I'll have to send it to you. Um, don't have to, yeah, I'll have to look at that later and see how they actually like standardize if they standardize the weights and whatnot. Um,
We could take a brief pause.
we could pause.
We
Let's
will
do that.
pause.
And we're back after a short intermission.
A very short intermission.
Yeah. So basically, we found the study. The one thing we were looking for, and I'm sure it's probably in here. I just have to like
Mm-hmm.
read it a little more thoroughly, but weren't able to see like how they prescribe the loads. If it's just like self-selected, which honestly I'm thinking it's somewhat self-selected, dealing with recreational athletes in this study, which is for the most case like pretty common for studies like this. But
That's
essentially,
usually what happens.
yeah, we did find the mean and the max load for the certain exercises. So on the RDL, people used a mean load of 64 kilograms with a max load of 90 kilograms. So at most, people are using like a little over 200 pounds on the RDL. So not super heavy. And then hip thrust, 73 for the mean, and then up to 130 kilos for the max on the hip thrust. And then obviously Nordic curl, no one's going to use any weight, so it's zeros across the board. And it does have some pretty good graphs about, the spike in force. The RDL did show the greatest amount of force in two of the three muscles of the hamstring. So you got the biceps femoris long head. RDL was the greatest amount of force per body weight, as well as the semimembranosus, although the Nordic curl as well as sprinting itself did provide more force on the semitendinosus. And then the greatest amount of stretch happened on the RDL, which if you look at all the different exercises that they tested, it's pretty like obvious that the RDL is going to provide the most stretch just based on like the mechanics of the actual exercise. Hamstring bridge was one of them. Obviously, you're not going to get a ton of range of motion at hamstring bridge. Same thing with like a hip thrust. It's a little bit more range of motion, but not a ton, especially compared to like an RDL. Nordic, same thing. So it's also kind of interesting too, is like they'll put, obviously I would think the spike in force could be potentially a little bit higher with the Nordic. Obviously the total max force is going to be higher in an RDL. Obviously it depends on how fast you go down during the eccentric. Obviously sprinting is going to be like the highest peak in force, especially when you're contacting the ground, you're going to have a large spike in eccentric force each time you take a step.
But once you release, you're essentially unloaded, unweighted in flight.
Exactly.
Like the rate of force and the rate of force development, that will be the mat. Well, we'll give you that highest peak force as well. But there's not, which is, we want to sprint, we want to jump, we want to throw, right? Yes. Vastly agree. 100%. The hard part is there's no sustainment of true tension over that, 0.25 milliseconds while you're on the ground. So you have to use the lifting to supplement that. What the weird one that you just mentioned, and it's in some of the findings with the peak forces, that semitendinosis, basically we want to look at like the back of a hamstring, right? For most people who don't know, the middle of the hamstring is your bicep femoris. Your semimembranosus is like your interior, and then your semitendinosus is going to be that it's a big muscle that stretches basically parallel to your bicep femoris, and it goes from essentially up. It originates towards the glute, and it inserts basically on the back side of the outer knee, or like the lateral side of your knee. That having the highest peak force in a Nordic is something that's interesting. Mainly from the effect of, right, I would love to know. The hard part is you'll never, without like a full, like maybe like a muscle, like graph, it's hard to tell like where that peak force encounters. Is it happening closer to the knee or closer to, the actual knee joint and that lever, or is it up towards the glute or in the interior, or like that medial like muscle belly aspect to it? But it being such, I really would have thought that like the semimembranosus would have had like the higher peak force with the interior, especially towards the adductor, not the semitendinosus. That's interesting. Which then bodes the question, not to go back to this is what we always answer it. It's like you should do both. if the
Hmm.
membranosus and the biceps femoris are going to be peaked with like an RDL, and you can get in, say 1 or 2 reps of a Nordic, but it's going to be high tension, and you can get that. Wouldn't you have a more robust hamstring in general? Right now, you're covering your bases, and this is kind of alluding back to like what we talked to about it, where it's like now you can pick and choose like which exercise you prefer based off of where you want to go for because of this information, and it becomes very useful because it helps you pick some of your exercise selection. Hey, maybe your soft tissue, not maybe injuries. Hopefully, you don't have like major soft tissue injuries, but you have those like nicks and bruises, and you're able to identify that it's happening. Maybe towards the glute more and outside of, on the lateral side of each athlete. Then you can kind of be like, okay, we're probably going for Nordics. If they're happening more in the muscle belly, more like interior or medial to the body, we need more RDLs. Those things can kind of happen. So that. I just think that's interesting. Now, I would love to see the difference in effects of what we love, machines. All right, let's think machine work here. We have a seated hamstring curl versus a prone hamstring curl versus a prone hamstring curl, but the hips flexed. So they have like that
Mm.
break in the pad. I
Yes.
personally, I would love to see like the difference in effects on those. We can kind of infer it based off of like old school bodybuilding of like where we have muscular development. Um, and just kind of like understanding like a little bit of biomechanics and physics and then using some of this study. But I would love it if that was like, if we took a further implications, let's get on that. And let's do the same thing for like deltoid and biceps and tricep movements.
Yeah. I mean, you put it perfectly, just being able to like know what each exercise does, and especially when it's two different exercises that target the same muscle group or movement pattern and how it affects differently, and then kind of
Mm-hmm.
reverse engineer from that, and or insert them into your program based on the needs of the sport, athlete, etc. And I think one other thing you touched on that I think is good to like bring up is like, well, people will see that like sprinting has like the highest amounts of force for hamstrings. Well, why don't we just do sprinting for hamstring development? And I think you put it perfectly. It's like you can't just think about like if your goal is to like climb Mount Everest, you can't just only climb
Climb.
Mount Everest. Yeah, you can't just only be up at the top doing the stuff where it's like high altitude, not a lot of oxygen, you're more at risk to like die. You have to build some base at the bottom where there's more oxygen, where you can kind of like work on your technical skills in order for you to be able to like express that with like sprinting. So if you think about, obviously sprinting is going to be high velocity, and then you got an RDL, which is more, you know, higher force, lower velocity. We need to
Mm-hmm.
probably do both ends of the spectrum, and then probably a little bit of work in the middle. I think obviously people kind of the middle of the curve has gotten shit on quite a bit in the last, I feel like, few years. I don't think it's necessarily anything wrong with being in the middle, but I tend to think with these things of like, okay, you have your really high velocity, lower force, that would be like sprinting, and then you have your high force, lower velocity stuff, so like a heavy barbell RDL, something like that. If you spend a good amount of your time combined there in those two areas, and then maybe touch the middle here and there, you probably get that through your accessories, just kind of inadvertently, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you can't just do sprinting for sprint development. Obviously, it's going to be the most specific thing, but if there's no foundation of strength and resiliency, you're not really getting a ton of stretch when you're doing a sprint as compared to like an RDL. So you're not really prepping the full tissue for that demand, obviously. So
Yeah. Like I would even argue that like your middle ground, like in this example, your middle ground's a sled push.
sled push
What
could be
what
submaximal running, could be
yeah. Those things are vastly important. Even if we just look at the secondary and tertiary effects that you'll have, like submaximal running, for example. If you can stack enough of them, you can probably stack higher alactic outputs because the system is prepared for it. Um, you will probably have a higher tissue resiliency because we're doing it under higher forces. And when we look at rehab, what do? We get into that middle ground. you're lowering limb velocity in order to make sure that it can sustain and prepare the tissue to handle those higher forces at higher speeds. So if we do it in rehab, and I'm not saying throw the whole book out, go medical model, and do everything based off of a rehab perspective, but if the rehab has a specific progression in order to attain the results of being prepared to sprint, why wouldn't you take from that, right? The strength coaches are, sports performance coaches are the biggest copycats in the entire world. Everyone's a plagiarist. Why not plagiarize the stuff that's been tested? Like, why don't we do that? That's one of those things. But overall, good study. I think it leaves a lot of room to ponder, which is, I think, is almost more important than giving you direct results. Everyone wants to read a study and go, boom, now we know the answer, everything's solved, we can be done with it, move on to the next one. That's what they hope when they read a book. They never want to re-explore this. A good study will make you ponder and make you think, okay, what would those other implications be? Why is this important? What else can we do this with? And I think that's where this kind of leaves us.
Yeah, I think this kind of leads me to wonder a little bit more about the hip thrust, just because they said like it resulted in less peak force and stretch than walking, which like that's not very intuitive to think about and it's also what's the load, right? They weren't doing 130 kilograms for a hip
It's
thrust.
about 285 pounds.
That's not a whole lot. We've both seen the athletes doing like 400 to 500 pounds, and that's like on the like minimum.
I'd be very interested to see the setup of how they did the hip thrust. Some of those details aren't very clear, and like I said, like where is it measured with a little bit of the ground reaction force versus it's just mechanically it's slightly different, right? And I'm not trying to cope for the hip thrust, but having done them, at 400-500 plus pounds, I know for a fact it's more than walking.
Yeah, it looks like a standard. Yeah, it looks like a pretty standard setup, like back on a bench, starting from the ground. The one thing that sticks out to me is the toes are up, so they're just driving through the heels. Like the whole forefoot and toe is up. They're literally just have the heel on the ground.
Okay.
I don't know if that would affect it a whole lot.
I mean, you'd probably. My assumption is it would transfer a little bit more of the emphasis into the glute, which
if anything.
Which, I mean, to an extent, like the hip thrust is more of a glute exercise and a glute development platform than a hamstring one. Like a GHR, if you're hitting, like a GHR Razor Nordic in comparison, you become more and more hamstring movement oriented because the lever that's moving is the hamstring as you get down that list. So my thought here could also be, with the glute being the primary driver, the hamstring becomes a secondary or tertiary kind of effect from the exercise, which is almost a little, it's fair in the sense of which one is going to get development for the hamstrings. Unfair to be like,
because people see that and they say, well, walking's better for hamstrings than hip thrust.
Yeah,
it's like, well,
duh, they're going to
oversimplify
it.
Right, and it's like, duh, like the glute is like the main extender of the hip. So obviously it's going to take a brunt of the work if you set it up correctly.
Exactly. So it's like you have to have that caveat or like that asterisk on that one. That would be like saying like a front squat's going to develop your VMO more than, than like an ankle rocker squat. Yeah, because
it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing, or a standing calf raise, but you're just or a seated calf raise. Like you're probably going to have some quad development at some point because of the knee flexion and having it move up and down and brace it or whatever. But whatever it is,
I also think there's just something to like we said, like people try to optimize all the time. I think there's something to like exercises that, yeah, maybe they don't target the muscle, quote unquote, as effectively, but you're able to essentially do a little bit more volume with those and not get quite
Mm-hmm.
as beat up, which could lead to like a different goal. Like if your goal is like work capacity, you
Then they
everyone
serve their
has
purpose.
right, yeah, and everyone knows those exercises where it's like it seems like you can just do a endless amount of like sets and just be like I feel like seated cable rows is one of those things for me. Like you can rip like you could rip like 6 or 7 sets of those and you're not going to be like super sore. Same thing with like a hip thrust. Like if you rip 7 sets of barbell RDLs at a good intensity, you're going to be
You're
hurting.
gonna be, yeah,
Versus like I'm not saying that you're not going to be hurting if you do like hip thrusts like that, but
a little bit
there's certain
less.
exercises where you can build more volume. And now some people would say like, oh, it's junk volume. That's not what you want. So you only do. But then if that's the argument, then you're only going to do the quote unquote optimal exercises. Then you're going to lack variation in your program, and
Now your metrics are essentially then based off of how good of a mover are you in specific movement patterns.
right. There's
Not,
no variability.
yeah, and that's, this was a really good discussion that we ended up having. It was Kel, myself, and Demarco, and it was athleticism versus skill, right? And he brought up, good friend of his, and he watched. It was a football player. Might have been. I had no clue. I think it might have been. I can't remember. Anyway, throws out the first pitch of a game. That was Malik Willis. Malik Willis throws out the first pitch. Doesn't look great. And he said, in the sense, someone could be a better athlete than Malik Willis. Malik Willis, or more athletic than Malik Willis in a sense. You put Malik Willis in a football game, he moves really well. He can throw a football. He can spin that rock. But can he easily step into another another game, another sport, and be at least relatively successful? In the same sense, we look at like LeBron James. Everyone says LeBron James is the best athlete of all time. LeBron James is probably the most athletic basketball player of all time. Is he the most skilled? Is he the most skilled basketball player? Probably not. You know, but he's able to, like, he could probably, like, you look at like a Michael Jordan. He could play baseball. He stepped right into golf and got really good at golf. You could put him in all these different areas. You know, and then we kind of got to talking and we said, what was a sport? And I gave a very arbitrary sport and made a case for it. And when I first said it, everybody was like, "You're an idiot. Shut up." And then once I explained it, they were like, "Okay, I see your point." But we were talking, what's a sport that helps develop the most athleticism in, say, a child outside of like just free play? Because free play is going to have you experiment and do so much unstructured play to get you more
I
athletic.
see.
If you picked one sport and said, "Hey, you're going to do that," go have
Oh,
fun.
I would say I'd honestly say like gymnastics or some sort of like yeah, I might say gymnastics or even some sort of like martial art. I don't know. What'd you say?
Okay. So I'll give you what they said first. Harold said, Jake said tennis,
Okay.
and I think that's fair. That's a hand-eye coordination. You have the proprioception environment. Blah blah blah. That's a good one. Demarco said like I think like he was like I think maybe like a lacrosse. You really have to be like a mover in lacrosse. When I said this, they all shit their pants and basically was like, "You're nuts." But I said skateboarding.
Okay.
Here's my case.
I don't think
It,
that's a dumb one at all, actually. That's why I picked
unilateral,
gymnastics.
yeah, unilateral movement. You're on an unstable piece as well, so you have to develop stability. You got to be strong to be able to move yourself on a skateboard. You also have to perceive the environment. It's not just, and I'm treating skateboarding as It's not, hey, we hop on the driveway and we see if we can stand on it while we ride down the driveway. I'm talking actually push it, see if you can hit
Popping
a couple of
ollies.
pop an ollie, hit a kickflip. You have to move your limb independent. Your if you ride or standard or regular, your left leg has to move independently of your right leg, let alone independently of your right arm and your left arm. When you're approaching maybe a ramp or a ledge or a rail, you have to perceive the environment and react to it. You have to be fast enough. You have to be able to put the brakes on, be strong enough to put the brakes on. Not only that, now if you get your hands involved, if you're doing a grab or any of those small hand flip tricks, whatever it is, here's the best part too. In tennis, do you learn how to fall?
Not like you do in skateboarding.
Exactly. In lacrosse, like you probably have a little bit of it, but not skateboarding. If you're jumping off something, you quickly learn how to fall and how to
Mm-hmm.
like protect yourself very, very quickly. Not only that, and then once I explained some of these things, that's when DeMarco kind of was like, and I was like, here's the best part is you have to like there's a psychological point too. At skateboarding, you will try 1,000 times for one trick. And then you'll get
Mm-hmm.
that one trick and you go, okay, cool. I either got to go do it again, or I'm going to pick another trick and I'm going to go and I'm going to fail 1,000 times and I'm going to keep failing. So you learn to fail. And he's like, and that's when he kind of clicked with it. And he was like, yeah, he's like, that's such a big piece. People don't understand like the mental like stress that you need to be able to put on yourself of like learning to fail and continuously overcome that. And I was like, not saying like, hey, skateboarding was one of my first sports. And that's one of those ones that like helped me become a lot better of an athlete because I just did it. I skateboarded, I snowboarded. Obviously, I played basketball. I played baseball a very small amount of time, but then played football and stuff like that. Like that was the unstructured play, mainly because
Mm-hmm.
we were not all my friends skateboarded, so I was like, I'm just doing this by myself. But
I really like that. The reason I say gymnastics is there's a lot of jumping. So like say for example, you're taking like an all around. Like if you're just doing one event, it's a little bit different. But say you're doing the all around, you have to learn a lot of different skills. So obviously there's the vault where you need to sprint and then go into a jump, or on the floor, shorter sprints into a lot of like jumps, both like you're getting like contact prep and like plyo. You're not necessarily contact prep in the sense of like football, but you're getting plyos and quote unquote like ballistics, both lower and upper body wise. Rings, that's another event.
mm-hmm.
You have the bars, you have the pommel horse. I think like that's a good mix of more so upper body development than lower body development. If you look at gymnasts, they're pretty jacked up top, not as quite as jacked on the lower half. I think a big one is like proprioception and like knowing yourself in space. Like think of like for females like the balance beam, or like just when you're doing a floor routine and they jump
Have
in
to
the air,
flip.
do have to flip, turn, find yourself in space, and then stick the landing. I think the psychological piece is huge in that too. Like it's such a detail oriented sport, and like the every routine is based around like each sequence, and each move has like a certain point total. So you're trying to get the most points, but you also don't want to just go super super difficult, because if you can't execute the moves, you're obviously not going to get the full point amount. And I mean the practices too are like you said, like failing over and over. Like a normal like gymnastics practice, from my experience, is like could be like 3 to 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty freaking insane. So that's my case. I really like, you made a really good case for the skateboarding too, but I think like gymnastics is a really good one, or like tumbling.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was thinking like grappling or some sort of like martial art
Yeah.
as well. The only thing you don't really get with gymnastics is like the environment is just you. You're not really getting a lot of perception action in accords to reacting to another person, the environment. And I guess like you don't really
Yeah.
get that in skateboarding too. Obviously, like like for the most part, like if I go onto this bench, it's probably not going to break.
But I'm gonna make an argument for you. Go to a park. Go to a skate park.
Other skateboarders, yeah,
Other skateboarders,
yeah,
or in a sense, and this is where like there's trade offs. Like snowboarding, like you're not really pushing. Your feet are strapped in for the most part, unless you're just getting off the lift.
hmm
You're learning how to carve, which will help gauge your speed, which is a lot of proprioception in the environment. But it's like the same thing. Like go take one of those like 10-foot kickers that launches you, 15, 20 feet. You're going to have to figure out how to land and figure
hmm
out how to land pretty quick. Or that's how I snapped my fucking collarbone. I was doing a cork, which is a backflip 180. Stopped rotating, like literally, it was like the third time I'd ever done one. Stopped rotating upside down in the air, and I was like, I guess I'm going down. And then the ground got closer and closer to my face, and I went like this, snapped my collarbone. But like, you learn how to do that stuff. You learn how to move. I think that's such a big thing that's like vastly underrated, and it's like learning how to move in an environment. Like how many kids will sit in a gym and they'll take 1,000 shots up, right? You look
hmm
awesome. But then there's like how many kids are probably better basketball players. And this was a great argument by Jake, who he was on last week's episode. And but he was like, how many kids got better from taking 1,000 shots up versus
playing pickup.
playing pickup, going to the park?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like,
He's like, you're going to get so much better playing pickup. He's like, you may not get the same amount of shot attempts, but you're learning other aspects of the game, how to play actual basketball. And like, kind of, in a sense, you're messing around and like figuring out what it's like to play and having that unstructured versus I got to hit 10 shots from here, 10 shots from here, you know? Or like another example was, Nick said, how I got so much better at playing baseball by like going out in the backyard with my dad, and we were out there for an hour. I probably either hit 1,000 balls or threw 1,000 just over that course of in his mind of like just bonding with his dad and hanging out. Versus you go to like an AAU team or a travel team, and then you're like, hey, we have we're fielding ground balls for an hour and a half, but you're taking 8 reps because there's so many kids.
mhm.
Where are you getting better? If you look at from a pure, the stimulus is the adaptation, the volume drives how far it would go. Kel Smith, where's your volume? Your volume is coming from the unstructured play where it's just having fun, but you're probably like fielding it above the head, grounders outside the frame. Maybe if you're like playing catch, you're like messing around trying to frame it versus like, hey, that you're going to catch 3 pop flies in practice.
hmm
I just don't know. In a sense, like, does that ruin some of the development in late stages? Obviously, like they'll need more specific things, but does that limit development, in a sense, for maybe college athletes or late high schools?
I think there's an argument for both sides as to what's better to develop, like a game environment or like a quote unquote practice environment. One, because we
Mm-hmm.
said, like, if we take the basketball example, you're obviously going to get more shot attempts if it's just you shooting by yourself, but you're going to get more like a game like shot attempts, even if it's only a few by playing in a game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's kind of both ends of the spectrum. Like
You should do both at that
shooting,
stage.
yeah, like shooting practice by yourself is like more so like skill, like the actual skill, and then the game environment is obviously going to be a lot more specific. This is kind of like an argument, like a discussion we had earlier in spring, is like spring training, like you play, you build up and then you start playing spring training games pretty much every day. And the argument is
Mm-hmm.
like, well, like do the games actually get them ready for the season? Like,
It's a good argument.
because the game environment for most people is like the lowest density of reps you're going to get. You could go a whole baseball game and not get a ball hit to you, like if you're in the outfield.
Especially if you got a good pitcher.
Yeah, exactly. And you could only go out to bat, 3 times. You could strike out every time. you get the lowest density of reps. So is that really the best way to, I was talking to one of our guys the other day. He's like, he had a rough start to the year, and he wasn't playing every day, and he's like it's tough because he's like, I go 0 for 4, and it's like, all right, like I'll get it tomorrow. No, like I might not have a chance to play for another 5 days. Like it's
Yeah.
so then all of a sudden, like you have a few bad games in a row. Now he's playing a lot more and he's in a lot more of a groove. But it's like when you start off, 0 for 10, it's a lot harder to be like, oh, I'll get it when like I only have a chance to play a couple times a week versus if I'm getting that every day. So I think the frequency and like the density of reps definitely plays into it. And of course, at the end of the day, we're always going to come back to like just do both if you have time. But I think this is like I
If you
think
have to pick one.
yeah, it's like if you have to pick one, it's like, but I never do. But it's a good. I feel like these arguments and conversations are still good to have, nonetheless, even if you end up at the exact same place you started, because you'll still have like a little bit different perspective on it.
You'll be forced to think. I think that's a big thing. I don't care how far off topic we get. So that's just for the record here. But there's so much to just having a discussion, because you have to, at some point, you may have to defend your idea. It's the same thing we talk about with writing it down. Like, you're going to find the holes that you might need to learn more about and discover that. Or you find the counterpoints that people like instead, and you'll start to understand that. And even if you come to the same conclusion, you probably have a broader understanding. Maybe even if it is minutely some superficial stuff in a broader sense, but you're very deep where you know it, but broader and more surface area, you've still learned more. And that's, to relate it back, in a sense, is that not unstructured play? We're just unstructured play within conversation.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And I think people are we're a little bit like, you can get a little bit scared sometimes because it's like, oh shit, like I don't want this person to know that I don't know everything. But like, it's the funny part is like no one knows everything, obviously.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
And most of the time, most of the time, it's like it's not going to be like, oh, like if you're an idiot, like why didn't you know that? It's
like, oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and it's you both learn, and I think a lot of times too is you disagree on something, you don't talk about it, you stay in disagreement. You have a conversation, you find out what the other person is actually thinking, and you probably agree on more than what you thought. You probably have more common ground than what you thought in the first place, and you get the perspective of the other person. So, which I'm glad what you said before we started recording. When you showed me that post, I was like, I hate when people make these arguments. I think they're stupid. And you're like, well, I actually like think this. I'm like, yeah, it's true. We should actually probably talk about it, because you can say all day like, oh, it's a stupid argument, but is it?
See, that's the thing. People don't understand. This is a little insider trading for everybody. Like, the vast thing will be, essentially the same way of like when you were an intern and you saw me and Gabe. Gabe and I agreed on like 98% of things. But we
the
had
2% you didn't.
We would argue with. We would argue with each other. And, on the surface level, like we may not present that in front of people, but that's just how it was. And you get there. Now, to the listeners, they'll think you and I agree on so much. But we do have disagreements. But we, not to say, oh, well, we handle it differently because we're friends and, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. We like having these disagreements, and it's fun to find out where we disagree, because now we can learn and we can kind of go from those points. And yeah, like you immediately, as soon as I brought that up, you were like, I hate when people do this stuff, like blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, fuck, like you're right. We have to, I was being intellectually lazy, we could call it, which like seriously, like it's easy to do. And like, it almost sounds kind of like, it's kind of like a smart ass answer, right? Like, well, why not just do both? It's like, well, yeah, duh. But why is one better than the other? Or why is one better for X reason, Y reason than the other? Do you actually know that?
Mm-hmm. And there's just so much. And I don't know if, like, I would not say I'm getting wiser as I get older. I have just maybe the jadedness in myself is it has flashes where it goes away to where that bewilderment of like, that's interesting, let's dig into that, like comes back a little bit more. Um, but like it is very fun to get those and find those things that make you kind of have those like, I gotta check you and you gotta check me in
Yeah,
senses.
yeah, and it's good to. It's like we're fortunate to have people around us that are willing to do that because I know that's not just like a given.
Hmm.
But yeah, I feel like I mean, obviously, we know closer to nothing than we do to everything, and that's kind of kind of crazy to think about, and that will always be the case. But I don't know. It's also not necessarily like, oh, like I want to be right, because right could mean a lot of different things depending on the context. It's like, okay, I just want to be like a little less wrong and know the context, know where this fits into mine, where that fits into yours. I think that's kind of the way I look at it too, is like it's not right, it's just more maybe like less wrong for X situation or X scenario. So
It'll be sick. Which, I mean, that is, God, my neck is sore.
this guy
not
went
to
to a
bring
rock concert.
not to bring that back up, but I just went like this, and I was like, ooh, that's stiff. Headbanging could be the new neck training.
It's true.
You want to talk about peak forces and high rates of velocity?
Wasn't who was that rock star that like, they're always like slamming their foot on the stage? Wasn't there a guy that like slammed it so hard he ended up having like a hip replacement just from like
Yeah,
over years of doing that?
yeah, just constantly. But that's the same thing as like Hulk Hogan had back issues because he used to do the leg drop.
Yeah.
So I
Repetitive
think
overuse injuries,
we're
folks.
that's
They'll
all it
get you.
is.
Doesn't
Stop
matter if you're an
spamming
athlete.
moves.
Yeah, stop spamming moves. Doesn't matter if you're a country music singer or a pro football player.
Um, Now we do get to talk about a fun piece. I think this would be a great topic to finish on. We got a new toy.
Yeah, you
We got
did.
a, we got a new toy. It's in our basketball weight room. Um, got to try it. Hasn't been used a total ton because when it came in, basketball teams are in like a little bit of like an off period. As we kind of go into finals, like they might come around and mess around on it a little bit, but they're not like, hey, it's in your program. You're going to do this right now. They got the Nautilus low leverage row machine. Give me that.
Give me that.
Give me that. I'm gonna eat the whole thing. I'm joking, but so incredible. Now, I think this begs the question, right? That is such a beautiful machine. It's incredible, so fun, and like we've been playing with variations on how to get very large stretches on this. Kind of, what's the best way to use it? Machines in a collegiate weight room. It's so. I think the field is very binary on yes or no. Or they'll be like, you can get two machines, but it's the simple machines. It's you can have the GHR and you can have a belt squat. We take those two out, right? We've kind of talked about like our dream machines, like in the sense of like what we love to lift on. But if we look at like what is very useful in a collegiate weight room, right? Maybe not necessarily conditioning machines. You'll always see echo bikes. You'll always see maybe a rower or a skier from a rehab or a conditioning perspective. Um, but we talk about like actual machines for lifting.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you find the value in like not even just find the value of having them? I think they're valuable to have, but like you're dedicating floor space to them. What are you putting in?
I probably got to go like a dual cable stack. I feel like that's a pretty easy one, just based on like how versatile they are, how many different things you can do. You can do unilateral, bilateral. I feel like that's a pretty like standard piece though, like a cable stack or like a dual cable stack.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably either going some sort of belt squat or almost like a pendulum squat. You know what I really like is I like the one we had at Elon, like the Rogue Rhino, because you
Mm-hmm.
can do. I like it better than the Pit Shark because you don't have
It's
to
more
load.
like the athletic performance platform.
Yes, it's more like the athletic training platform, the OG West Side barbell. You don't have to load 7 plates on there. Like you get 3 plates on there, and it's like, oh, this is
That's a
actually like 3
lot.
plates. Yeah, you can do marches on there. You can do single leg work on there. That's got to be one of them for me. Thinking upper body wise, oof.
I think
I
I'm
do
saying
feel like
a lat
I
pull
do feel
down.
like yeah, I feel like some sort of row. I'm more inclined to go a pull versus a push when I go to a machine, whether that's a
Yeah.
lat pull down, or if you're going horizontal, something like a hammer strength row, or obviously like a low row. I like we have the Sorinex like dual where it's like lat pull down, and then you can do like the seated cable row as well. Obviously, it's not chest
Yep.
supported, but that's like a good, and you can do some other good stuff with it too. But it's a little bit more versatile. It doesn't take up a ton of space. Um,
I think a plate loaded combo leg
leg
extension leg
extension,
curl,
leg curl. Yes.
like a prime, or I don't know. I don't think any of like the collegiate manufacturers for weight rooms, like a Sorinex, like a Rogue. I don't know if they make them. They'll probably do them
Mhm.
custom when somebody wants it, but that's probably one I would outsource and not say like the whole weight room is outfitted by so and so,
Mhm.
and I would go pick up like a Prime or a Nautilus where it's a plate loaded one. Mainly for here's why. Um, Especially those two companies, they do a very good job of here's 3 pegs to put plates on to change your resistance curve. Um, Number two, leg extension, leg curl, smaller footprint, get 2 machines in one. Number three, you now get a isolated movement. You now get a rehab perspective. You now get unilateral, bilateral, and variation. You can do, it's the same argument we went towards like a hip thrust versus like an RDL. You can probably do more volume in an isolated fashion than a compound fashion. It's not systemically fatiguing. It's not globally fatiguing. But we're gonna have the stimulus on the essential muscle. Um, I'm a big fan. I think those like when we look at like you talk about a hypertrophy standpoint and why does everyone want hypertrophy? 2 reasons. Number one, the sport coach is going to look at you and go, "We're not big enough," right? And it's like, okay, are you getting overpowered? Why are you getting overpowered? Is it from a mass standpoint or is it from an application of forces? Well, if we can help solve the mass standpoint with bodybuilding and eating. Obviously, not eating, but like that's not going to help. But bodybuilding is going to get you mass, man. I don't care what anyone says. Like that's the truth. And then the other standpoint is we can get a lot of volume out of it. We can get that. And like the other piece and like why do you want hypertrophy is well, are you going to increase the pennation angle? Is that muscle stronger? If that muscle's stronger, it's less likely to get injured. We talk about robustness. That's part of the robustness piece. Is it a larger, more resilient muscle group?
Mhm.
Perfect. What's some of the most common soft tissue injuries? Groin, quad,
Hamstring.
hamstring, right? Calf and hamstring are probably the two largest, um, and then groin is probably like number three. You're going to get a little bit of groin work from those. Now, if I'm getting a hamstring curl, I'm definitely going to get the leg extension because coach needs to lift too. You got to look the part a little bit. Got to make sure that
That's
they
right.
see my. So, I think that's a huge one. Uh, Honestly, I still like a hip thrust machine even after talking about this. I think those are great. I don't know if I'm dedicating the floor space to it to get 10 of them, like Michigan, which their weight room's gorgeous. If I could, I would, but I don't have 40,000 square feet to dedicate to weight room space.
I like, and I said this before. I like an assisted dip slash pull up machine.
Yeah, there's so much you can do.
There's so much you can do, and it's like also you can go by 5 pound increments until you can do a one arm pull up. Like there's a long runway for progression there, or even like someone that can't do dips, you can do assisted and then work to unassisted and then weighted. You could even do a single arm dip You can do. I really like doing like a almost like a drop catch. So you have like some
Yep.
assistance, and then you're switching different grips on the pull up just for like some like rotator cuff prep and stuff like that. Single arm scap pull ups.
You've had me back on the West Side videos, and there was a Louis video. Took a med ball, put it on the pad for your knees, and he was using it as a tricep extension.
I like
You,
yeah, that's a really good idea. I
what are
thought
we
about that
talking
one.
about? Dude,
That
you've now
one.
just changed the entirety of the use case of this, and now it's more versatile.
I
Give
like
me
that.
that.
I like doing essentially like a standing crunch. So arms extended, and then just think about
Mm.
segmenting the spine one vertebrae at a time, almost like a reverse Jefferson curl, pushing down for like a standing crunch. You can do the same thing with a side bend, get that arm straight, and just try to push that thing down like a side bend.
You just have a
You can,
platform you can push into, and
hmm
instead of holding it, your grip's no longer a limiting factor.
yep. You can do,
Perfect.
if you want some like loaded hip mobility, getting kind of like a pigeon stretch, try to push down on that thing, let it pull you back up. If you want some actual like loaded mobility work there, um, there's a ton of stuff you can do. We were messing around with, like the pegs you can use for like
Hmm.
almost like Hatfield handles,
Yeah.
and putting them on, like holding like the Hatfield handles. These are like the small ones. Holding them on like the pull up handles and doing like an assisted pull up, really getting a lot of like
Wrist
like
flexion,
extra
external
flex,
rotation.
yeah, like deviation, like just different ways to like work the wrist and forearm, which are like obviously like baseball is like super important, but or for really
Yeah.
for any throwing athlete. Um, yeah, there's just a lot you can do on there. There's just a lot you can do on there.
Speaking of testing, I don't mean to derail us here one more time. We were lifting, saw the rings, started playing around. We were talking about movies during our lift the other day, and sitting there, it's me, Evan, Kel, couple meatheads, right? We love that shit. We're talking about movies, great movies. Superbad gets brought up. Step Brothers gets brought up, and the grandfather that started it all, Old School. What's one of the most iconic scenes in the movie Old School? It's okay. I got you.
Is yeah.
I
Is
want you
it
to think of
old school? Is
Will Ferrell
Will
and Vince
Ferrell?
Vaughn
As I say, is it
and
when
Luke
he's
Wilson.
running through the streets naked, asking for KFC?
Okay. Also a great iconic scene. Second most iconic scene,
When
maybe,
he finds out that you just tell me.
when they have to do the participation in sports. And Will
Oh yeah,
Ferrell
yeah, yeah, yeah.
has the cigarette in his mouth and he's hitting the iron cross.
Oh yes.
So we're sitting there and we're laughing about it. And we're like, oh my God, that's hilarious. We turn around, the rings are sitting there. So what do we instinctively do? It goes back to our unstructured play when we found the jump mat, or when we and you used to just mess around and be like, let's get on some stuff. So we start hitting iron crosses, starting at the elbows, able to hold it. Okay, we can hold it for like 5-10 seconds. Super hard. Don't get me wrong. My pec stretched so much probably that it hasn't stretched in 10 years. And then we start to move it out. I'm like, okay, I can get to like mid forearm. I can hold it for like 2 or 3 seconds. So we're like, how can we get the full hands on the rings? So we start using some band assistance under the knees. We keep going. I'm the lightest one, Out of those guys, I'm victim weight. I'm like 178. They're 200 plus. So we get like the big, thick, like orange bands. We hang one. We put it like suspenders. Kel's in it. Kel's got him underneath his armpits. He's hitting the iron cross. I'm like, dude, you look great. How much of that is like kind of how much are you doing? And he just goes, I ain't doing shit, and starts has the ring. He has the rings in the hand. He's like, I can hang here all day, and he's like shadow boxing. So he starts bouncing like a baby, like when you put in a little carrier that's like hanging in the doorway. It was incredible, but then we start thinking about like, okay, how much of that could you use in maybe like a more individualized setting, but like shoulder care?
Hmm. Yeah, you can do that on the assisted pull-up to further my
Exactly.
point.
Exactly. Like that's what it's kind of bringing me back to is like, okay, we want shoulder care. You have to be in a little bit more of a detrimental position and just provide enough resistance to where we can like poke at that. And then, like you said, if you get the 5 pound increments, you're scaling that process.
Hmm.
So I think like there's just so much to be valued in like everyone sees a machine and says, okay, well the machine can do this one thing. There's so much versatility, especially depending on what machine you get. Like even that like Nautilus row, it's like, well, we're hitting full chest supported rows. We're doing a standing variation. We're sliding it over to the left pec and getting like an extreme stretch on the right arm to pull all the way through. Like
Hmm.
just because it's meant to do one thing doesn't mean it can't do another. And I think that's like, going back to I think it was 3 episodes ago, like we talked about Louis, he was constantly a tinkerer. We can tinker with that stuff. And I think like on paper, you'll have to kind of sell that to maybe an administration when you're like outfitting a gym or whatnot. But that's where I'm like a multi-plate resistance curve on a, a seated hamstring leg extension combo or like the assisted pull-up machine. The other thing is you can treat that into like a press variation, lower the resistance,
Hmm.
press away from it. Then you start to build overhead strength in a pressing variation, not just pulling. So there's all those pieces to it, or sorry, heighten the weight to press against. So there's all those things that it's like, what can you do? And obviously, like maybe a T-bar row isn't like your most versatile machine. You can probably get a landmine and a T-bar handle.
Yeah, some definitely
Is
have
it
more
still sick?
versatility.
Yeah.
Yeah, some definitely have more versatility than others. Like leg press, obviously, big footprint, can't do a whole lot besides leg press, single leg press, calf raise. There's probably other
Yeah.
shit that I don't know too,
Yeah.
but can't do it. Yeah, there's certain ones that are more versatile than others.
Then there's like a Kaiser squat, Kaiser runner. Like those are great. I think there's a lot of versatility in something like that from like a Kaiser squat perspective, like really load up like a dynamic effort kind of like squat movement or like a Hatfield kind of variation, a jump, a calf raise, etc. Kaiser runner is very probably specific on like what it's used for. Do I still think it's sick? Yes. Is it worth $3,000? Probably not.
Depends on how
But
much
like,
money you have.
yeah, like if I got an unlimited budget, I'm getting three of them.
Yeah. Hmm.
But like, there's just some of those that it's like we've as sports performance professionals, a lot of the times your mind gets closed off to the possibilities of like what a machine can do from like a general fitness perspective and just development of the muscular tissue or any of those pieces versus seeing it as a scalable option of like, well, I have so many options with a squat rack and a barbell. Very true. Very true. But are you also limiting your thought process in applying the use of those machines? Whereas, like, and maybe in your situation, you're in a variety of different gyms. It's not just your home gym that you guys have at the facility. You have to go elsewhere, or you're going to, an Anytime Fitness on the road or a random gym to make sure that the guys can train. You're taking the opportunity to find other pieces that you can dabble in.
Yeah.
Which,
Got to work with what you got.
like there's going to be situations where like the development is limited when you don't have some, you're in a smaller place and all you have is like the trap bar that you brought, maybe like the Anchor or whatever cable machine you brought with your Beyond Power. But if you're in the situation where you're like, okay, we're going to actually go to this like Gold's Gym or whatever. Well, now it's like, okay, go hit your trap bar deadlifts or you squat. We're going to do our pull-up variation on this because we have the opportunity and I want to mix it up a little bit. Like now, like your athletes, just by circumstances alone, are getting higher pieces of like all around development because they're getting exposed to variations within their movement pattern while still accomplishing the same goal.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think there's like a fine line between doing too much like variation. Like that's why I like say if we can keep the compounds the same and then like the accessories, if as long as we're getting the same like movement pattern, I don't really have a huge problem doing a machine one week and a free weight the other week, as long as we're making some constant progression on kind of like the big rocks, especially in this setting. If it's more of a controlled setting, obviously, like if you're college and you're training at the same weight room all the time, you probably want to ride out the same like progression for 3 to 6 weeks, or maybe you don't. But
at the same time, it's like you talk about like, what was it, like 2 weeks ago, you guys were doing pull-ups because you had like a sick ledge that you saw.
yeah, ledge of the dugout. We didn't have a pull-up bar. Ledge of the dugout pull-ups.
I mean, what are we talking about? Now we're changing grip variation.
Yep.
You know, we're finding ways to do that in a collegiate, like during my current block right now on my day 2 in my pull-up variation. We're doing a little bit more like McGill style, where it's like, hey, we're gonna hit a single pull-up for more sets. And I'm, 1 week I'm like, hey, I want you to weight it. 1 week I'm like, I need you to go no weight, but as far as possible that you can to achieve the rep still. Hold for a second at the bottom, hold for a second at the top. Like I'm creating I'm creating the variation when like you get the ability to focus on possibly more important things because the variation's been given to you.
100%.
Just a fun way to look at it.
Different way to look at it.
Yeah.
All right. Should we close it out?
Let's close this out. You want to go first? You want me to?
I got it. Bum Energy Blue Snow Cone. Still kind of finishing this one off. It's a good flavor. It's definitely not my favorite bum flavor. Root beer, Dr. Bum,
cream soda,
iced tea lemon, cream soda, iced tea lemonade. They got to be up there. So really, this is probably, it's still a good flavor, but it's probably one of my least favorite bum flavors.
Which is crazy because it is a good flavor. Yeah,
it's still a really good flavor. It's a good blue snow cone. Overall, all things considered, I'm gonna have to give it like a 7.8, which is still really high. Usually all the other bums are in like the low 9s, high 8s. We give it a 7.8. Only the flavor. I'm just not as big of a fan as their other flavors. And I feel like other like blue raspberry-esque flavors like Rain, Gorilla Mind, Rise are a little bit better than this flavor, but it's still pretty solid.
Yeah. My summer edition Sprite Red Bull. Unfortunately, it's going to get a little bit of a lower rating because I was like, this will be like I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a less like lemon lime Sprite-esque flavor. I thought it was going to be a very punchy like lime, almost like a limeade in a sense, but not as like deliberately tart as like maybe the electric limeade from Ghost. I thought it was going to be a little bit more, almost maybe like lime juicy flavored in a sense, and a little bit lower on the carbonation. But it tastes, I mean, if you like Sprite and you want Sprite with 114 milligrams of caffeine instead of it being 0, and you got $7 burning a hole in your pocket, this is your guy. Can looks sick. I love that yellow. Like, it's great. 6 points. I'm going to hate myself when I say this, and there's going to be one person out there that does the thing. 6.7.
6.7.
6.7.
It'll be me.
Yeah, it's good. I had a little bit more higher expectations, especially after just having that like the cherry sakura, or cherry sakura, I don't know. But it's like, that was so good. That was like a cherry with like almost like a little bit of floral to it. I wanted more out of this. The problem is Red Bull has placed unreal expectations on themselves by consistently delivering high quality flavors. So when one falls short, you're like, God, this sucks. Yeah. And it doesn't suck. It's still a good flavor. You naturally are coming into this going, it's going to be another banger.
Yep. Yeah. All right. We'll get it next time. As always, folks, appreciate you guys watching. Make sure to tune in. Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Subscribe wherever you are listening. Leave us a review. It really helps us get in the algorithm and spread the show. BetBoys.com if you want to support the boys with some merch. BetBoys.tv on Instagram. And our personal Instagrams are always tagged and collaborated with those posts if you want to check out some more training content. As always, guys, appreciate you. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.
Peace.
I gotta pause it. There we go.